Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of AVA, the Album versus Album podcast, where I sit down either by myself or with a guest and talk about which album fits under a niche umbrella best. I am your host, Johnny, but a small portion of the internet knows me as Viral Rack, and hope you are all doing well. I'm doing all right today. I'm recording this actually the day before it goes up on the 4th of July. Just chilling at home, listening to people pop off fireworks in the middle of the day. You know, just random 4th of July things. Sitting down with some cheap beer. I'm just going to talk about some music. The podcast this week is going to be solo. I'm flying solo this week because while I had a couple of prospects up in the air, I've had a couple people tell me that they would love to be on the show. I was supposed to record one this week. That kind of fell through. I ain't mad about it. This is one that I could easily have done at any time, this week's episode, either by myself or with a guest. When it came to finding a guest, if I were to conceptualize one for this topic, I don't know anyone that loves the musical in question that I'm going to be comparing two adaptations of, so that's fine. I feel like I love this musical enough that I don't mind taking it solo this week, because I love the subject of today's episode so much, and I even love the artists in question. It's just that upsetting that both versions of this musical are fucking awful, and we're going to be talking about which one is more awful here in a minute. But before we do that, as is customary for this show, we're going to take a look at the last episode, which was on Weird Al. You know, thanks to Mark from Fully Involved for being on that one. I'll definitely be having him on the show. You know, he'll be a frequent collaborator on this show whenever we both have time to sit down and knock one out, because it's always good to banter with Mark. He's always a good person to talk about music with. He's always got interesting opinions, and we both have a good dynamic that's been well established in years past. And as far as the podcast itself goes, there's only 2 comments on it. One from Mark, who liked the thumbnail, the bleeding of the even worse into the running with scissors. I thought it fit really well. And then Rockin' Movies with Tyler, who just enjoyed the Mad Sounds reunion. You know, a lot of Mad Sounds love in there. You know, I also want to point out that post that podcast, I've been seeing a lot of Weird Al content pop up on the internet lately. You know, NPR dropped their Tiny Desk concert from 2009 with Weird Al. Binging with Babish did his Twinkie Wiener Sandwich special. And then actually this week, Red Letter Media dropped a review on UHF. So, you know, I don't want to say we started this trend on Weird Al content, but it's just really well timed that all of this Weird Al content is happening. But that was you know, the podcast itself is a great episode. Feels like nobody really had any contingency in the comments. Nobody had any points to bring up. Mostly because, I mean, like we established in that cast, Running with Scissors is pretty much definitively like one of Weird Al's best work. And while Even Worse is a great record that does a lot of cool things, it ain't Running with Scissors. You know, it ain't even his best record in the 80s. Dare to Be Stupid, I think, might be his best record in the 80s. But again, I try to make a case for it, even if I love Running with Scissors a lot. But yeah, there's no topping that as far as which closes out its respective decade better. But I just want to say, in future episodes, if I do have a topic or there's a topic that's discussed and we didn't necessarily address it in the podcast proper, or you think you have another thing you'd like to throw in tandem with it that goes really well with the question at hand that you think does it better than one or both of the contenders, feel free to leave it in the comments. And we'll address it at this point in the podcast. You know, we'll just sit down. I'll hash it out with the comments. If they're before I record the next episode, I'll do it with the guest, if there is a guest in question. And we'll just continue the last thread, tie it up in a nice little bow before moving on to the current subject at hand. And this week, like I said up at the top, we have a good-ass comparison to bring into the ring. For those who don't know, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is one of my favorite musicals. It's one of my favorite movies. Like, I'd put it easily in like a top 50 maybe top 100. It'd be on that list for sure. I think it's a charming-ass movie with a great soundtrack. And actually watching Red Letter Media's video on Willy Wonka taught me a lot about the soundtrack in that movie. It was incredible. It's an incredible soundtrack. A lot of memorable songs, a lot of good motifs sonically that carry through people's certain themes and flourishments that happen and all that sort of stuff. And it's a good-ass time, you know. And then in 2005, esteemed director Tim Burton brought it upon himself to do an adaptation of it called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And he enlisted the help of his buddy, his frequent collaborator, Danny Elfman, to do the soundtrack for it. And while the movie has moments that are more in line with the book, I don't like the movie as much, at all. And I think the soundtrack is pretty bad. And in 2014, one of my favorite bands, Primus, also took it upon themselves to do an adaptation of the original soundtrack in their own style. They called it Primus and the Chocolate Factory with the Fun Guy Ensemble. And it's fucking weird. Again, while you would think Danny Elfman doing a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie makes a lot of sense. He loves that whimsical shit. It's not as, obvious as like a Alice in Wonderland, but you could, I feel like, conceptually think that that's a good pairing, and I feel like Danny Elfman, he's a great musician. He's a great film orchestrator. I love his work. And so again, that would be a good accompaniment. He could add a lot of whimsy to a magical story. And Primus, doing a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory tribute, also kind of makes a lot of sense because they're a weird-ass band. Les Claypool has this very enigmatic delivery to his songs that I feel like would play really well into the Willy Wonka persona. I feel like they could do their own version of the soundtrack justice, and yet it's not that good. It's really not that good. It has problems. And to this week, I'll be talking about both the positives and mostly the negatives of both, and presenting which I think is the worst Willy Wonka soundtrack adaptation. And we're going to start with the one that came out first, the Danny Elfman one for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Now, I'm not going to blame Danny Elfman for some of this album's shortcomings because in interviews, he talked about how some of the sonic motifs were not his idea. They just weren't. I have to do a burpee, so give me 1 second. No, I don't. I don't know what is going on with my gastrointestinal system, but whatever. He was asked to do some of those sonic motifs by Tim Burton, and you can kind of tell because Danny Elfman does a good job at doing a bunch of different things. Yet whenever he works with Tim Burton, seemingly the soundtracks themselves across the board have very similar motifs, very similar sonic characteristics. They're very indicative of Tim Burton's style. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Tim asked Danny to do those things, some of those things. Getting off the bat, I think that some of the songs on here, some of the sounds on here sound straight up like they don't fit. Like one of the things that's great about the Willy Wonka soundtrack in general, and you can hear it from the first moment the movie starts with that beautiful chocolate montage. The music itself has this ounce of whimsy to it that is incredibly iconic. Like it is just the musical notes, the progression at which they're done are just beautifully whimsical. And again, they carry through, they have thread, like Pure Imagination is a sonic thread throughout the film. because Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory is this magical fucking place where imagination comes to life, and I feel like that's something that the Danny Elfman version does not get down. There's two motifs that the original film has, sonically, three really, if you really think about it. You have the Willy Wonka stuff. You have the Charlie motifs of like brightness and joy, like pureness and heart, and then you have the Oompa Loompa stuff, which is like sort of lessons to be taught to the audience. And the Danny Elfman version tries to do something with the Oompa Loompa stuff, but doesn't really do anything with the other two motifs. It kind of goes out the window. The stuff that it adds that tries to do differently, I don't think are good. The Wonka's Welcome song, it's awful. I don't like that song. I think it's really bad. I also don't like that really as a whole, the movie doesn't do much with its music until you get to the Chocolate Factory. While some of the songs in the original, namely one in particular, isn't really good, Cheer Up Charlie, and its absence in the Danny Elfman version is great. There are three musical motifs that I wish were here. Candyman, that song is incredible. Candyman is a great ass song that like helps give an ounce of whimsy in the real world to just the idea of candy. And that Willy Wonka is the King Candyman, and again, the Charlie motifs, like with the golden ticket song and the theme that plays when he gets the ticket, like that it's introduced then, the golden ticket theme, that sort of like, that great whimsical moment. It's not in the Danny Elfman version. Instead, it's this sterile ass Tim Burton ass soundtrack, where some instances doesn't even sound like a Tim Burton Danny Elfman crossover. The main title and the Wonka's first shop sounds straight up like something Danny would have composed for the Spider-Man soundtrack, which is bizarre. Like, when I was re-listening to it for the podcast, I was like, what am I listening to? This sounds like I could see Spider-Man swinging through New York to this, not watch the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory be played instead. It's a weird-ass experience that kind of carries as, like, again, a motif throughout the soundtrack. It doesn't really sound like anything like the original. It just sounds like a really shitty, it just sounds like Danny Elfman music, which it's not bad, but it's nothing like, it's not as memorable. Danny Elfman's written memorable themes, and you would think by getting this project, he would do something more memorable than this. For it, he doesn't, and as far as the Oompa Loompa songs, I don't like them. I really don't like them. The one that I do like is Veruca Salt, because they do like a psych pop type thing. They try to make every single one different, which I like the idea of. I like that concept more than what Primus does in playing it straight. I like that Augustus Gloop has like a Bollywood style song, that's really buoyant and jovial. Violet Beauregard has like a funk song. Again, Veruca Salt has that psychedelic pop tune. And Mike TV has like a glam rock one, which is the worst of them. As a kid, I actually really loved the Mike TV one, and that's just because I really liked glam rock and metal when I was a teenager. But as I've gotten older, I hate his one. I've always thought the Violet and the Augustus ones are okay. They're kind of catchy in their own regard, but I do like the original Oompa Loompa songs more. I just respect Danny Elfman and Tim Burton for wanting to do something different with each one, because I can understand if you're trying to contextualize it or modernize it, wanting to do something like that, because I could see some people being turned off by the Oompa Loompa songs in the original being the same thing. I like it. I love them. I think it does a good job at reinforcing what the Oompa Loompas are there for in context of the musical. But, again, I get it. I just think that it falls flat on most occasions. That Veruca Salt one, though, That shit's dope. That shit slaps. That is like a really cool song. I just like it, and I like the vibe of it. I love the sounds. I love the production on it. I think it sounds really whimsical, really psychedelic in the best way. And I think it's really, really, really neat. And I think it's the best aspect, the best attribute of the Danny Elfman version. But other than that, I just think it's really disappointing. And on the other side of that coin, Primus and the Chocolate Factory hurts because I love this band. Like, I like Danny Elfman a lot. I think he's a really respected composer, and I get why he gets work because I think he's really talented. But I love Primus. You guys know that. I talked about them in my favorite bands of all time. And when this was announced, I was kind of hyped for it because I love Primus. And again, like I said, this makes a lot of sense, you know? Seeing them tackle Willy Wonka just makes all of the sense. They're weird. I feel like they could tap into some of what the Danny Elfman version is doing in making the world of Willy Wonka a little more unnerving. But they do literally everything from the movie. Like they do all the songs from the movie, which I respect. They're doing literally everything from Cheer Up Charlie through the boat ride. That's cool. But man, they fall flat on a lot of instances on this project, which I'll be talking about. It's weird doing this because I'm going to do a reformatted discography review on Primus, so consider this like spoilers for my thoughts on this extensively. But this is a big old pile of poo-poo. Like, the Wonka Nights, I like that motif. I like that it tries to reinforce the pure imagination motif. But especially the first one feels totally useless. Feels completely useless. They made Cheer Up Charlie like a little unsettling, which is weird. They did the same thing to Candyman. You know, I feel like Candyman could have been really cool. You could have made it like a Big Brown Beaver sort of jovial song, but instead you tried to make it unnerving too. Also, they just slowed some of these songs down for no seemable reason. Like Golden Ticket. Why? Why make that like slowed down in that way? You know, what I think makes that song great in the original is making it jovial and bouncy and fun. You know, it doesn't need to be unnerving. I do like that they make the the Lermoninoff thing from Before Pure Imagination its own track here, because I like that sound. I just like that little note thing. It's a nice moment in the original, and it leads into Pure Imagination really well. And I'm gonna get this off the bat. Pure Imagination is one of my favorite songs like ever. I love the song Pure Imagination. I love it in the original. I love the performance of it in the original. I love the accompanying music. It's so whimsical. It is the perfect embodiment of like true fantastical whimsy. Primus's version is okay. It's honestly not that bad. I think it is it must have been the song that like inspired Primus to do this, because like it feels the most well put together, you know. And again, it kind of, because they use it in the Hello Wonka Nights and the Farewell Wonka Nights, so it feels like the catalyst to them wanting to do this project. And I think it works. I think it works really, really well. It again has that sort of unnerving edge that I would expect from Primus doing this, and I don't think it falters in that regard. And after that, again, the Oompa songs they're fine. They played a little more straight. Again, they add some of that unnervingness to it. But, you know, if you don't like the old Wonka songs or the old Oompa Loompa songs, you're probably not going to like Primus's version of them. I think they're fine. I like the originals more. But I like, again, that they decided to double down on just having them be this motif. They have the sort of sweeping cellos that feel very reminiscent of Sailing the Seas of Cheese, be the sort of intro to them to the Oompa Loompas themselves, and I like that. There's certain things I don't like that they did throughout the rest of the track listing. I don't like their boat ride. I think Marilyn Manson's the only adaptation of that I think is ever going to work. The original's great. It's an incredible sequence in the movie. And Marilyn Manson did a good job at adapting it and making it creepier. I think it's one of the best things Marilyn Manson's ever done, in my opinion. And Primus's version, it's like a dizzying, tempo-changing moment that, it is what it is, but I don't think it's as good. I think that the choice to do I Want It Now and Wonka-mobile also felt incredibly unnecessary, and that's the biggest problem with this soundtrack, is that when it hits, in the one time it truly hits the best, it's okay. And the Oompa songs, I have a soft spot for them, so I dig it. But there's a lot of nonsense on here, whereas the Danny Elfman version feels kind of bland in its own sense of underwhelmingness and how it sounds like everything else Danny Elfman's done, almost to a derivative degree in some of the moments that I talked about. A lot of the stuff that isn't from like Danny Elfman's playbook just kind of feels very generic or kind of just whatever. It's background accompaniment, like the Indian Palace, where they talked about the backstory of Willy Wonka giving this prince this chocolate palace, which is one of many things from the Tim Burton movie that I don't think matter. Like, I get it, and I get that it's there to like add the book to it, but and I love the book. I've read it and its sequel. I'm a big fan of Willy Wonka to like a large degree, and I respect Tim Burton for wanting to do that, but the stuff he adds doesn't do anything for me at all in a lot of the performances in the film. But that's a film, part of it. The music itself, it's its own level of blandness. Primus did it. They played it straight. They made it Primus. They just did too much. They did more than they really needed to. And, the stuff that they didn't need to do also kind of felt wholly unnecessary and felt like Primus being Primus, or, in some instances, they made it too primacy, like in Cheer Up Charlie or Golden Ticket, which is its own level of disappointment. Again, Candyman didn't need to sound like how it did on this project, and that makes it kind of shit. That makes it pretty underwhelming. And I feel like, again, given I was kind of excited for this project because I love both of these things, it didn't work. It didn't work out for me, personally. But which do I think is worse? Which project do I think does a worse job at it, at adapting Willy Wonka? I personally think it's the Danny Elfman version. For as much as I like the idea of Danny Elfman making music that accompanies Willy Wonka, I feel like he did very little to make it sound different from anything else he's done in the past. While Primus definitely kind of went too much into their own realms on a lot of it, like I said, when it hits and when it stays faithful to the original, I enjoy it. Again, I like the Oompa songs. I like Pure Imagination. I like that they made Lermontov its own sort of 4-second snippet on the record. I like that they try to reaffirm not only the Oompa Loompa threads throughout the entire project, in a very consistent way. They make Pure Imagination its own consistent thread throughout the project. What in the Wonkanites section, that's something that the Danny Elfman version doesn't do at all. The only thing it tries to do is the Oompa Loompa stuff, which I think, again, it fails at in a lot of instances. So, yeah, that's what I think about. That's why I think the Primus version is just a little bit better. I think that the Danny Elfman version is just a little bit worse. Now, as for what you guys thought, because I put this on the page, or I put this on the Instagram, on that Instagram a month ago, and you guys agreed with me. You guys, by 3 votes, said that Danny Elfman's was the worst adaptation. And what's funny is the people that voted Primus, I'm a little surprised in some instances, but I know that there's some people that have nostalgia for the Danny Elfman version. I used to have nostalgia for that movie. I liked it when it came out. Because, again, I'll eat up anything Willy Wonka at least once and try it out. But I used to have it on DVD, and I sold it because I rewatched it like a couple years later, and I was like, I don't want this. I don't like this movie. You know, and while I'm glad Primus never like made anything to accompany their version of it, because I feel like that would be terrible, I appreciate that they at least sonically tried to carry through the motifs from the original. But you guys as a whole seem to agree with me. If you didn't agree with me and you're listening to this podcast, why do you disagree? What talking points do you think I should have brought up in this podcast to support that Primus's version is worse and Danny Elfman's is better? Let me know in those comments down below. I really like doing this podcast, man. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's a lot of fun to sit down and talk about music, and I actually really liked doing this one in particular because, again, I like Willy Wonka a lot. I remember seeing it as a child, and it just it was one of those movies that just really made me fall in love with musicals in general, you know, because I watched Disney movies growing up, and I watched other musicals, and I feel like in school, like early on. But when I saw that movie, I love it, from Gene Wilder's performance to the soundtrack itself to a lot of the charm that's in that movie. Like, I love so much about the original Willy Wonka, to the point that, again, I'll eat pretty much anything. I'll eat up anything Willy Wonka at least once. I'll give it a try, you know. But I also like the prospect of this episode talking about things that are bad and talking about which one is worse. I feel like that would be a fun subject to do with people in the future. If I find one that isn't quite as niche as this. You know, I'm all about niches on this show, and I got more niches coming down the pipeline. But this one was very intrinsically me, because I like Willy Wonka. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got for this week. Sorry again that it's solo. If you're tired of hearing me just talk on at length about something. But I've got like 3-4 guests up in the air. I just got to nail down recording times for them and get their podcasts pulled together, and get subjects doled out to some and kind of get them nailed down for a time. But, you know, this is still, sometimes it's just going to be like this, you know? I'm just going to be flying solo. Just kind of doling out my own thoughts. If I were to be this consistent with it and have guests, that would be incredible. That'd be insane. But I know in the current landscape, that's not feasible in some instances. So I don't mind riding solo sometimes, and hopefully you guys don't mind either. But I'm gonna get out of here. If you like this podcast, be sure to give it a like. I'm trying to get this out into other platforms. That's why I introduced it. Hello everyone, instead of Hello World of YouTube. But if you're listening to this on YouTube and you wanna, if you like the show, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdery content, be sure to subscribe. I drop 6 to 7 vids or things like this a week, talking about those 3 things. And I really enjoy the interactions I get with you guys. If you want to go a step further and support me on Patreon, you're more than welcome to do that. Special thanks to my patrons. If you want to join their ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, or help drive the community, it's linked in the description. On screen now, if you're listening to this on YouTube, again, bunch of playlists for you to check out, other stuff out in the ether, just more stuff to check out, playlists, stuff that YouTube recommends, stuff like that. If I do have this up somewhere else and you're listening to this on another platform, subscribe to me on there. You know, I drop this podcast every other week. And again, intermittent, me and guests. If you want to participate in the polls for this, if you want to vote on a poll, or if you want to add a comment to a poll instead of commenting on a video, on the video version. My Instagram is Viral Rack. I drop the polls a lot more intermittently. I haven't dropped one in a couple of weeks, but I'm gonna start dropping more on there with guests that I have in mind. Just kind of putting them out there, just seeing what people think about them, and sharing thoughts. Yeah, I'm gonna get out of here though. Thank you so much for listening. I have been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.